Hello and welcome to Take 5 Key Terms number 2, and this one's on youth subculture. This is just 5 key terms and 5 sociologists that are really important, and if you really learn these they may really help you in your studies. So the 5 key terms we're going to look at for youth subculture are hegemony, invisible girl, resistance and semiotic and neo-tribes. Okay, so hopefully we've got the idea. So hegemony, what do we mean by hegemony? So hegemony is a traditional set of values. It tends to come from ruling class traditional ideas. Okay, Marxists argue these values are imposed by the ruling class and lead to social control. So for example, hegemonic ideas on gender will be those traditional ideas set out in the 1950s of what male and female should be. So males being the breadwinner, the masculine one, not showing emotion, and females as the emotional one, the caregiver, the nurturer, the housewife. Okay, so hegemony, and that's a key thing when we're looking at the CCCS and how they explain some of the reasons for young people joining youth subcultures. The next one we're looking at is invisible girl. Now, the early studies of youth subcultures have been criticised by some feminists like Hydenstone or McRobbie and Garber, who said that these early studies by the CCCS left out girls. So the invisible girl is a phrase used to explain how youth subcultures tends to be dominated by males. Some sociologists argue that the early studies were too mainstream and that girls were involved in these youth subcultures. They just weren't seen as important or significant to the male sociologists studying them. Resistance, a key factor when looking at this CCCS neo-Marxist ideas. The idea that these young people are resisting the things around them. So they could be resisting school values. They could be resisting the other things around them. For example, punks have argued they were resisting capitalism and hegemonic values of capitalism. So resistance is a key thing. Used by conflict theorists to refer to a subculture being critical or going against capitalist ideas of the ruling class. Then we've got semiotic. This was a term coined by John Clark in his study of skinheads. This is the analysis of signs and symbols to uncover hidden meanings. And we did this in class when we looked at a picture of a skinhead, and we looked at how everything, like their really short hair, the clothes that they wore, the boots that they wore, all had hidden meanings. And then neo-tribes. This is something introduced by postmodernists, for example, Maffesoli and Bennett, who looked at club culture in the 1990s, and they argued that subcultures now have looser connections and they couldn't really be called subcultures like in the past. So neo-tribes refers to an alternative explanation of subcultures to explain temporary groups of youth coming together. And those studies are really significant because they suggest that class isn't a key factor anymore, gender isn't a key factor, ethnicity isn't a key factor, it's just choice and interest and having fun. Okay, so let's see what we can remember. Hegemony, invisible girl, resistance, semiotic, and neo-tribes. Okay, hopefully you can remember some of those. Okay, 5 key sociologists then. Hall and Jefferson, Dick Hebdige, Sivandon, Reddington, and Luke and Luke. So Hall and Jefferson then. We've done a lot on this in class. These were a pair of sociologists linked to the CCCS. They carried out a study on Teddy boys, argued they were showing contempt for the class system and their middle class superiors. It's all about resistance. It was all about individual style. So Hall and Jefferson is a key CCCS study who looked at how these working class lads took on board these Edwardian style jackets, the style that they did, to try and gain themselves some status. Dick Hebditch, he's another CCCS sociologist. He did a study on punks and hippies. Punks were a resistant subculture. They called them the blank generation. The only thing punks had in common was the rejection of social order. Okay, then we've got Sivandam, who argued that black subcultures are a continuation of the colonial class struggle. Sivandam looked at the Windrush generation and the growth of Rastafarianism, which isn't just a youth culture movement actually, but how it was the second generation Windrush immigrants sort of gaining their identity and sort of keeping hold of those colonial roots. Then we've got Reddington. She looked at punks. She suggests females have played a key role in subcultures, but are often ignored by sociologists, pointing to Vivienne Westwood and punk culture. Luke and Luke, postmodernist sociologists, they argue that globalisation and the hybridisation of youth culture derived from music and films, and that's the most important thing for them in why young people join youth subcultures. So let's see what we can remember then. Hall and Jefferson, Teddy Boys, resistance. Dick Hebditch, punks, hippies, resisting capitalism. Sivandam, looking at black immigrants, Windrush generation, and the Rastafarian movement. Reddington saying girls do get involved in youth subculture, looking at punks, particularly Vivienne Westwood. And Luke and Luke is due to globalisation, hybridisation of youth subculture.